craft an amazing resume for every job seeker. So let's talk about, first and foremost, one of the things I really recommend, which is to create a master resume. And before you start, before you know what job you want to apply for, before even what you want to do, you could have no idea what career you want to go into. This is what you want to do. You want to make a master resume with everything you've ever done. I'm talking like volunteer work at your church. I'm talking the time you were a lifeguard when you were 16 at the pool. I'm talking, every single experience that, had a decent amount of value or, some level of responsibility. Make note of that. I'd say starting around the time you're like 15, 16 years old, if you did babysitting, things like that, write it all out into one master resume, and keep track of that information often. As you're changing positions, doing different internships, it's important to keep up with your master resume. That doesn't necessarily need to have all your skills listed, everything like that. It's really just more like a place to keep track of all of your job experiences, because later on down the line, you'll want to have those details. And as we grow older, they become harder to remember. When I look back to my job that I did 10 years ago, it's kind of difficult for me to remember some of the tasks, some of the metrics. Luckily, I'm still very much so in contact with my old boss, so I was able to attain a lot of those things, but that's not always accessible. So you want to keep track of all these things, because later on, when it comes to write resumes for specific jobs, you may have different experiences that are more valuable than others, and you may want to highlight those on your resume over others. And you'll be able to see more which ones stand out to you and sort of plug and play with these different job experiences to provide the best resume for what a specific recruiter, staffing specialist, hiring manager is looking for. So this master resume is just a great way for you to keep track of everything, keep fresh, keep it updated, and use it to your advantage when you're applying for different jobs. So let's talk about the different types of resumes. We have chronological resumes as well as functional resumes. And which is best? It really depends on sort of where you are in your walk in life. Professionals who have entry-level position and a degree in their field and have worked their way up to higher positions in companies, these people aren't likely going to need a functional resume. In regards to what I look at as a recruiter, I prefer to see chronological resumes versus functional resumes. Functional resumes are really only reserved for when you have a sort of non-standard work history or you have gaps in your resume. And what is chronological versus functional? I'll go ahead and break that down for you guys. So a chronological resume is probably what you're most familiar with. That is pretty much the standard form of resume. So that's when you have, and it actually should be reverse chronological. People call it chronological, but truly you're going from your most recent job experience down. So it's truly reverse chronological, but they just call it that. So yeah, you want to start there and then list your job experiences individually. And you're going to include what you did at each job experience underneath each experience specifically. Now, the reason as a recruiter why I prefer to see it in this manner is because it allows me to see how long you did a certain task. Oftentimes when we're looking for something on a resume for a job seeker, let's say hypothetically it asks me for 2 years of project management. On a chronological resume, I'm going to be able to see how long you worked at a place and see, within your bullet points, if you say project management and you're at a place for 3 years, then I know you did project management for 3 years. Whereas a functional resume, the way it breaks it down is it prefers you to list your skills. So you list your skills, leadership, time management, and then you describe tasks you did related to that in your roles. But you include all the experiences sort of as a list on its own. So it's like you just kind of list the title of what you did, and then like all the meat about individual things you excel at is at the top. This is good for non-standard work history and gaps in your resume because it's allowing you to really highlight your strengths. But functional resumes aren't going to work to your advantage in a corporate setting in that way oftentimes, because it's not going to convey how long you did a certain task. If you have leadership, time management, and something else listed at the top, and I'll have all your jobs listed at the bottom and how long you were there, I don't know what experiences apply to what roles. And therefore, I cannot speak to how long you did project management in that case. Even if it's listed as one of your skills, I have no idea which job you used it in. I have no idea how long you did it for. So, so functional is not usually the way to go, again, unless you have a non-standard work history or gaps in your resume. And if you do have gaps in your resume, I really do recommend including sort of a note about that. I had a client who came to me a couple weeks ago and wasn't sure what to do because she had actually had cancer and had taken off of work for like 2 years in like 2016 to 2018. And I encourage her just to include that, put why you were on, you had a gap in your resume, medical leave, cancer treatments, no one is going to question that. Or, if you moved and, you had a transition period, just sort of account for that gap in the resume. A gap isn't going to kill you. A gap isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's sometimes useful just to explain a little bit like where it comes from, just because it's helpful to know the context. So talking chronological resumes, because that's really what we're going to focus on today, start with the basics, your name and your contact information, pretty self-explanatory. You put your name up top, choose an appropriate size font. You don't want anything huge. I see a lot of people who have like their name like giant on their resume. It's not necessary. Your name can just be a normal size sort of font. You can make it a little bit bigger than everything else, but truly the thing we immediately go for is your work experience and your education. When I look at resumes, I even purposefully do not look at names. If there are photos on the resume, I do not look at the photo. I am trying to be as unbiased as possible and go straight to the work and straight to, is this person qualified? Man, woman, dog, I don't care. I want to know if they can do this job. And so you don't need to have anything overly flashy in that way. With your contact information, you'll want to include at least your email address and your phone number. I do also recommend including at least the city where you live. It is helpful for recruiters sometimes if they want to know if they're trying to recruit people in a certain location. That is helpful as well. So you may want to list your city, but I don't think you need to list your full address. That does become also a sort of a privacy issue. I feel sometimes like there's no need for your employer to know exactly where you live. So yeah, I recommend city, state. You don't need to give any more than that. And then you just want to include everything that you need in regards to how to contact you and how to see your LinkedIn. If you have a website, if you have a portfolio, you want to make sure to include that stuff as well. There we go. So should you include a summary? And this is debatable. And if you guys don't know what a summary is, it's that like little ditty at the top of your resume that talks about, where you want to go, what you want to do. This is something recruiters kind of debate. And again, I'll say this for everything I say today, take it with a grain of salt. I believe in you loving your own resume. You have to be confident out there. So at the end of the day, it's your resume and you need to make it how you want it. This is just, my corporate tech understanding of what we generally look at. And so summaries can be good or bad. Sometimes people have these giant summaries that are kind of unnecessary. We're not going to read them. If it takes up a bunch of space on the page, it bumps your work experience down, right? And as I said before, that's what we go for straight away. That's why generally we recommend having your work experience at the top of the resume. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But we recommend having it there because it should be easy to find. So if you do have a summary, make it short, sweet, to the point. It should really be geared more professionally. You don't need to include your hobbies, anything like that. Just really include what you want in a future role and your top skills. So I generally include it as, it's my way to pitch to a company what I'm looking for as well. Like mine says, I'm a, passionate people operations professional looking for a full-time company to grow with. Because as I am a contractor at Google, unfortunately, I am not a full-time employee yet. So that's something that I value. I'm looking for a company to grow with, and I make that clear in my summary that I'm loyal and that I want somewhere to grow and to build a trajectory. So, mine's like 3 sentences long, include a power metric, I can reduce time to hire by 50% and, improve your team's culture. Short, sweet, to the point, hit on a couple of things, and it doesn't really need to be much longer than that. It does not want to let me do it that way. Okay, we'll do it that way. So as we were saying earlier, there's 2 ways, right? For the work experience. New grads, you can put your education up top. If you want to put your education right under your summary or right under your name, if you're not going to do a summary, that is perfectly acceptable. I'd say for probably up to like 5 years after you graduate. And even longer after that. I'm not going to discount a great resume just because you have the education at the top. But standard, what we're more so looking for is for you to have new grads up top, or you don't even have to start that way. If you want to just start off with a professional resume and just start with your education on the bottom, you can do that as well. But take that with a grain of salt as well, because if you don't have a lot of experiences, if you haven't been involved in a lot of clubs, if you haven't been working during school, if you mainly have academia, you may want that to be the first thing because you mainly have academia. So take that with your experience. If you've been working since you're like 16 years old and you have a lot of work experience as well as your education, then I would say just move your education to the bottom, and have your work experience be the first thing. But it really just depends on your individual opinion and how far along you are in your process and in your work career. So your work experience, you want to show your impact. And what do I mean by that? There's plenty of jobs we do in our life, and I've done them before too, where you do a lot of like menial work, right? You grab coffee for someone, you do XYZ. That's not generally the kind of stuff you want to include in your resume. If you were a personal assistant, if you were other things like that, like there's better ways to say, got coffee and things like that. So you want to show your impact. You want to put things in your resume that show either like what you changed, a difference you made, what you were able to improve. These are things that we can quantify, right? Like, something went from 50% to 75%, or like admissions into a club, I was able to increase it from 5 people to 25 people. So that's, I cannot math right now, guys. It's been a long day, but that's increased by like a lot, like 400%, something like that. But yes, so that's the point. It's really easy to take some numbers, make a metric, show your impact. So you want to, I think I might have uploaded the wrong slide with this because we're talking about, oh, hello. Sorry, y'all. Okay. So you're going to include your work history in reverse chronological order, and you do want to include the company and the dates, as long with the month mark. A lot of people only put the year. Do not only put the year. I do not recommend it. I recommend putting the month that you worked someplace as well. And this is because it shows exactly how long you worked somewhere. Some people like to play in that gray area. A lot of people like to be vague on resumes because they feel like it can help them. And sometimes it can help you. But it's also a dangerous game to play, being vague on a resume, because then you're leaving it up to interpretation. And the recruiter may not know, what you're trying to get at. So, if you only put 2019, I don't know if you started in June. I don't know if you started in January. And if you need to have a year and a half's experience worth of a job, I'm not going to know where that started. So I may not be able to move forward with you as a candidate because you haven't made it clear exactly how long you've worked somewhere. And that is why I recommend always including the month mark as well. So include the month mark and make sure the formatting matches for each. So if, every job is bolded and the dates aren't, make sure on every single one that every job is bolded and the dates aren't. You need to be consistent with your formatting. It's very important. And then you want to give a higher level overview of what you did in the position. And this should really be focusing, again, on the higher level competencies, the important things, again, not grabbing coffee, like what did you change? What did you impact? What kind of difference did you make? And if you're not sure, ask your peers, in your academic clubs, like, what would you say? Like, what do I do in this space? And if you feel like you haven't done much, it's never too late to start a project. It's never too late to start a club. It's never too late to move in that direction where you can build something and start those metrics for yourself and be able to really quantify that impact. And there you want to show your impact with your previous positions and the data that you can provide. You can use, whether it be qualitative data or quantitative data, it's totally up to you. Just make sure that you're including that in there. And if you don't really have any data, make sure you're at least including soft skills throughout. I do not know why it wants to do that. Okay, so quantify your impact and form positions with hard data. We talked about this. One of the examples I love to give is operational efficiency and what I was able to improve in my previous job. So, and one example is that I love to give people because it's really simple for them to grasp. Is in my first job, I was a property manager. And we used to have this system that we used to charge the credit cards. We'd have to input everything manually. It was not efficient at all. I had to like take down all the client's information, put it in a spreadsheet, and then I had to charge it. It made absolutely no sense. Like the client should be putting in their own information. Anyway, don't get me started on that. But we developed a new process, and it went from taking us 6 minutes to charge a client to 4 minutes. And in that time, that's a reduction of a third. And so when we reduce by a third, what is that? 33%. I'm able to then put in my resume, improved new operational process that improved efficiency by 33%. So it's really as simple as like, 6 minutes to 4 minutes. I was able to add 2 more people to this. Surveys are great. I always recommend those as well. If you're part of any sort of academic club or anything where you feel you are lacking data, I encourage you to make your own data. Give a survey, and do it 1 month, and then the next month give the survey again. You can see, what improved, what you need to work on, and go from there. So that allows you to quantify your impact and, make some OKRs, which, these are things we measure ourselves to sort of in the tech and corporate world. And it's really important that you quantify your impact because it's proving that you can do what you say you do. Data is what backs you up. Your resume is, hey, I'm here, I can do this. And data says like, oh, she can really do this. We're showing you she can. So then on your resume, your education. So you want to include your degree, your university, and years you were there. New grads, you can include your GPA. I would say after a little while, you generally end up taking that off. I had mine on there forever too. I was proud because I graduated, cum laude, and I was like, yeah, I want to show everyone that I have an awesome GPA. To be honest, guys, no one's really looking at that. We just want to make sure you have a degree. So it's not as important. If you want to put it in there, feel free. It's your resume. You want to brag. This is not the time to be humble. I always tell people like your resume is where you want to shine, not the time to be humble. So if you have space and you want to put it on there, go for it. But I would say eventually within a couple of years, most people end up removing it because it's really not a standard thing for a professional resume to include your GPA on. And skills. So always include your hard skills. I cannot stress this more. Any sort of certifications you have. Like I don't even use my CPR or my first aid certification because I used to be a pre-nursing major and I still re-up it all the time. But I still have it on my resume because it's a good thing to have, anything you're qualified to do, even if you just do a little bit of coding, even if you just do a little bit of digital marketing management. You can always discuss the level of your skills later when they speak to you. You never want to obviously lie about how good you are at something. If they ask you, like I have Spanish on my resume. If they ask me, are you conversational in Spanish? I would say, no, I'm not conversational. I'm pretty good. I can understand a lot of Spanish. And you can always discuss the level of your skills later, but don't be afraid to put that in there because it's representing you and who you are and the jobs that you qualify for. So make sure every hard skill is in there, coding languages, real languages, any sort of office software, and all of that is great. And then you also want to include soft skills as well, like, teamwork, leadership, time optimization, creativity, your ability to collaborate. If you're a really great leader, the soft skills are great as well. And I recommend also throwing your soft skills in throughout your resume rather than always just listing them at the end. You can sort of put them throughout. So when you say, instead of like managed a club, you can say led a club. It's just changing up the words to kind of reflect those skills as well. So you want your resume to look clean and pleasing to the eye. Find a balance in the amount of text versus white space on the page. This is very important. So I usually recommend to people to shrink your margins, especially if you're having a hard time fitting your resume, on a page or 2 pages, depending on how much work experience you have. If you're struggling, definitely, decrease the margins. It's going to allow it a little bit more space to bust out and look a little bit cleaner. Play with font and color sizes and everything until you love it. But I would say that it does not need to be overly colorful or flashy. My resume is pretty much just a black and white, 2 pieces of paper, very simple, very just broken up with a couple of lines under each job experience all the way across to give it some cleanliness and some broken upness. But the only thing that has any color on my resume is where it says Google, because I have that in Google colors because I thought it would be fun. But yeah, keep it simple, keep it clean, stay consistent with your formatting. I cannot stress this enough. It's something recruiters really look at and they're weirdly picky about. We want your lines to line up. We want your bullet points to line up. It's, it shows that you care. It shows that you pay attention to detail. So, play around with those font sizes, color sizes, and make sure you don't have these giant white spaces on the page. One of the ways you can do that best is by not having, how do I want to say this? By not having lines that have 1 to like 3 words. So like if you have a resume and you have a bullet point, right? And it's too long and it goes to the next line, if you're only using like 1 word on that next line, it starts to make your resume look all like weird with this like broken upness. So I highly recommend, if there's less than like 4 3 words ish on a line, you either want to add more text to kind of fill that line up, maybe, add some more adjectives or something in there just to make the bullet point a little bit longer, or you want to shrink it down so that it fits onto one page, because it gives your resume that really like awkward spacing look and it just doesn't look clean and polished. So always save your resume as a PDF file. This is another big one as well. When you use a Word document, all these different places you're applying to, corporate places, tech places, we all use different software. And when your resume comes to us in, whether it be a Microsoft Doc, Google Doc, whatever, the systems they don't usually talk to each other very well. So by the time I get your resume, if you don't save it in a PDF format, it's often all messed up. And as I said before, I can love your resume and I can think you're great and I can pass you on to fellow recruiters, and they may not like you because, your bullet points are all messed up, and maybe you had a great resume and maybe it was beautifully crafted, but if you don't save it as a PDF, it could get messed up and we may never know that. So you definitely want to save it as a PDF, just for formatting continuity. And most importantly, when it comes to your resume, you want to, always be yourself. Hit on your strengths, hit on your authenticity. I'm a firm believer in culture and being who you are and bringing your full self to work. And you can make that shine in your resume, and really convey that to someone. Great opportunity is in those first couple sentences in a resume. So you really just want to convey that authenticity, and that will shine in your resume and come across and land you more jobs. And definitely like it too. Like I said before, you want to be happy with it. I speak to students a lot of times too, who have someone make their resume or craft their resume, or even, professionals who have been in the realm for years, and then they're unhappy with it. And they ask me for advice and I'm like, oh, well, actually, based on what I see at Google, we usually like this and you should do this. And then they're usually, I paid X amount of money for someone to, like your resume. Don't make any changes that you're not comfortable with. It's yours and you should be proud of it. So let's talk about some resume busting myths. Your resume does not need to be 1 page, guys. I know it's a mind-blowing secret, but it doesn't need to be 1 page. It can be 2 pages if you needed to. It can be 3 pages. It really just depends on how long you've been in an industry. I would say for students, generally, you guys only need 1 page. But if you have a lot of work experience, if you have a lot of academic projects, don't be afraid to make that call and go to a 2nd page. Big companies are still going to take you seriously. They're still going to give you the time of day. We're looking for people who include, all the things they do. We're looking at that like full bar across the page. But generally the rule of thumb is once you have about like 5 to 10 years experience, that's generally when you move to a 2nd page. I'm on a 2-page resume format right now as well, having about 10 years of experience in the work field. But you don't want to truncate your work. You never know what a recruiter is going to hone in on. So let's say you leave an experience out, or you decide to cut a couple bullet points to make it fit on 1 page. But, those were bullet points that were about, everything's important. If it's impactful, you don't want to have to cut anything off. And you never know what one recruiter will consider enough to meet a qualification. So you want to make sure that you give yourself your best chance by including all of your impactful work and not truncating it. And pre-professional experience can be very valuable, guys. I would definitely include that as well. If you don't have a lot of job experience, I would make a section, so say professional experience, and then make an additional section that says pre-professional experience. Talk about your babysitting, talk about that lifeguard job, talk about that kind of stuff if you don't have a lot of experience, and categorize it as pre-professional experience. But say the things you did there, responsible for XYZ, those things still matter. They show that you have commitment, that you have loyalty, that you're willing to work hard and grow. And especially in some of those experiences, if you have trajectory and the ability to grow within the company, that shows that you have the ability to be taught. So any sort of internships, any sort of small jobs like that, you want to include all that work. Again, don't truncate your work. Put your best foot out there. Make sure it's easy to find you. So we talked about this a little bit earlier too. Your resume does not need to be overly flashy, colorful, or include your photo. A lot of times people make they're beautiful resumes, don't get me wrong, they look great. But half the time these templates we get from Canva and places like that, like have half the page with pink and then your resume is on the right and it's like meant to look all artsy and pretty, but it's not an efficient use of space. You deny yourself that full page and that like ability to really have a lot of text and to really hit hard on your data and metrics when you're adding all this extra fluff that truly isn't necessary. The only time I would say that this is maybe something you do want to do, being a little bit more colorful and flashy, is if you're a creative type and you're going into creative work. If you're an art director or if you're a graphic designer or something like that, that would be the one time where I would say it's probably a little bit better for you to be a little bit more colorful, but make sure that it's not detracting from your work experience, because that should be the queen bee at the table. That's what we go for. That's the dinner. Everything else is the dessert. It's all fluff. So really job experience is where you want to hit it hard. And your resume should not include everything you did at a job. Just remember a high level overview. We don't need to, a good example I like to give of this is if you're like, say you're a data analyst or you do something like that, if you can code and do SQL, it's pretty much understood that you also know how to do like Microsoft Word. Like those are, if you're at that advanced of a level, you don't need to explain the lower level. So I hope that makes sense. Like you don't need to include everything, just the higher level competencies, because it's understood that you build blocks to get where you are, right? So if you're in a certain spot, it's understood that you have those other blocks. So no need to take up that extra space with stuff like that. And if you really want to hit hard on those other things, you can always list them in your skills section. Just put like Microsoft Office. Then they know you're proficient in Microsoft Office and you don't need to list it separately with your SQL. Because that's valuable space, valuable property, and you want to make good use of it. So what do recruiters look for? We are looking for loyalty and trajectory. And what does that mean? So we do not like to see candidates who are job hoppy, something that we like to call it. Job hoppiness is not something that recruiters like. It does not show loyalty and it does not show trajectory. Granted, I know that this is not always in your control. People get laid off. People, sometimes internships are only 2 months and then you have another 2-month internship, something like that. Internships, I will say, are a completely different animal. We don't look at internships as hoppiness because recruiters understand that internships, that's like the nature of internships. So that's a completely different animal. But like, let's say you're working, you worked at Amazon for 3 months and then you went to Google for 3 months. Then you went to Facebook for 3 months. It's like, A, why are you moving around that much? That's weird. Like, are you bad at your job or do you not get along with people? That sort of thing. And 3 months is not enough to really learn a role or make an impact or, really dig your hands in, get dirty and make a difference, especially in a big corporate world, especially in a big tech world. I can tell you, Google didn't let me like touch a resume for like at least 2 months. There's a lot of times where they spend like training you, preparing you for these things. And so if you're having short little stints at places, you're not getting the most out of it and you're ultimately not going to be as effective. So we don't want to see candidates who are bouncing from job to job all the time. It's hard to show your impact in that way. And we also love to see growth. So this is in every aspect. So especially with your pre-professional experience as well, and your professional experience. If you were able to grow, show it wherever you can. I have even on my resume in my little pre-professional work experience section, I started out bartending, guys. Like I did service industry for years. And I was a cocktail waitress at a nightclub. And I cocktail waitressed and I busted my booty and I worked really, really hard. And my boss saw how hard I worked. And like, waitresses don't make that much money. Usually the bartenders make more money. And I had started working so hard and getting so many customers and like talking and networking that I started making more money than them. And that's when my boss came to me and was like, hey, like, you're good at what you do. I want to train you to be a bartender. And so he trained me. And it was, you're able to show just in that little bit in your resume, like, hey, like someone sees the value in you. They take the time to train you. They take the time to advance you because you can be taught, because you work hard, etc. So any way you can show trajectory. Another example within my company for promotions, I was a brand ambassador and then I moved up to, assistant manager, manager. You want to show that trajectory. It shows that you stick around, it shows that you care, and it shows that you're able to make an impact, enough of an impact, even so, within a place that they want to continue to advance you. So make any sort of growth or promotion clear on your resume. I highly recommend, if you got promoted or something, parse out those different sections of job and make it clear. You can put the first line, like the last line of the second one, like promoted from assistant to regional manager. And then your next one will say regional manager, so to just really include that loyalty and trajectory, that's really what we like to see. Try to, I don't like to encourage people to stay in jobs they don't like. Culture is important. So, if you're sitting at a place and you've been there for 6 months and you're miserable and you're like, I don't want to look job hoppy, like, oh no, like I need to stay. Like, I never advocate for that. Like, if you're not happy with where you are, you need to leave. But there are, there's times where we are not maybe the happiest, but we can also grow and we can also learn. And in some of those experiences, I recommend, sticking it out, learning a little bit more. Sometimes we grow in conflict. So yeah, just think about that when you're leaving jobs. How long have I been here? How's this going to look on my resume? And again, gaps are okay. Just account for them. And yeah, loyalty and trajectory. Keep it in mind. So tailoring your resume to each job description. This is very important. So what does this mean when we're tailoring our resume to each job description or, each internship you're trying to apply for and things like that? You want to match the vocabulary they use in the job description. So, if they say project manager, you want to go ahead and say project manager, because the ATS system, the applicant tracking system, the robots who read the resumes, it wants to see that. If it says project management in the job description, it's looking for project management in the resume. And you want to make sure that those things are matching so that you can pass through, the applicant tracking systems. So just make sure you match the wording very clearly, reword your resume for each role you apply for. Look at the responsibilities for the role, look at the overall description and try to highlight some of that language. Go back to your master resume and say, what out of everything have I done really like hits on project management? Which one of these experiences should I include that's going to be the most valuable to me? So, definitely stick with that. I recommend either using Resume Worded or word clouds as a resource in that regard. You'll want to copy the job description, paste it in the word cloud, and then copy your resume text and paste it in the word cloud as well. And then see if those two word clouds are matching. If one's pulling up like, insights, project management, and something else, and this one's not pulling up those as the biggest words in the word cloud, you might have some work to do. You want those to generally be matching each other, because that's showing you like what words are present a lot in both of them, and you want those two things to match. So Resume Worded, or just using any sort of word cloud generator online, and making sure those things match to tailor your resume to each job description. Alrighty, and networking in regards to resumes. So you want to network, guys. I know you guys are going to have a seminar on this in a couple weeks, and June is fantastic. You guys are going to love her. But you want to get out there. You want to get out there and you want to network with people. It's one of the most valuable things you can do. Get on LinkedIn, optimize your profile, which June's going to teach you how to do. It's going to be great. And start making content. I can't stress this enough, or at least start engaging with content on LinkedIn. The way LinkedIn works, the algorithms on the back end, like if you don't use LinkedIn, it's not going to show you to people. It only likes to like populate your picture to people for potential positions and say like, hey, you might like this person, or hey, you might know this person if you use it. So the more you use LinkedIn, the more you engage with people's posts, the more you post stuff of your own, the more eyes you're going to get on you, and the more opportunities you're going to get because you are more visible. So I highly recommend doing that, even if you just start reposting other people's content. Always give them credit, obviously, but it's as simple as literally like copying someone's post, pasting it in your thing, and saying like, post by Handy Pranata, and you give Handy credit, and then you get a post, and you get the engagement from that, and what comes from that as well. And it's all reciprocal. You want these people to help you, and you can help them. And networking is about planting seeds to harvest later and growing relationships. So really focus on that, and connect with people who can potentially help you down the road. I always recommend connecting with everybody, because you never know who could have that great opportunity for you. um, so develop that relationship. I highly recommend, especially before asking for referrals. If you want a referral to a company, you really need to either know someone, have a friend who could hook you up with someone else, or really develop that relationship. You don't just want to go in cold on LinkedIn saying like, hey, help me. It doesn't work very well, especially for people who get hundreds of messages a day. So you really need to make yourself stand out, give before you take, connect with people, and then you can go from there. And then in regards to LinkedIn and your resume, you want to have, I'd say, generally most of your resume content on your LinkedIn. It can be in first person. LinkedIn is more casual. You want your about me to generally be in first person, and your job experience can be in first person as well. So, rather than saying like, I, managed a team of 30 contractors, I would say, I used to manage a team of 30 contractors. So, you can change it up. It's meant to be more conversational, but make sure you're keeping those keywords. Make sure you're keeping the data, the metrics, because that's what sourcers look for. Granted, you don't have to make it conversational. If you don't want to make it in I format, you don't have to. Mine personally isn't. But you definitely want to keep all those hard data metrics. And if you don't know what sourcers are, I'll explain that briefly for a second. But sourcers are people who go on LinkedIn, and the internet, and they look for people for jobs. They're like kind of like mini headhunters that work at tech companies like Google, Twitter, Facebook. So you always want to make sure your profile is optimized and has keywords and is ready to go, because they're always like hunting for people on the internet. And this is just a little tiny plug for my website. I actually have this presentation up on my website if you guys would like to see it again. It is up there for you to view. And if you need any additional help, I am happy to be a resource for you all. But that is the end of my little presentation for now. And I would be happy to take some questions if you guys have any.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I really did learn a lot from your presentation. And for our Q&A session, we have a few questions up in the chat. Can you see the chat? Um, or do
Let
you want me
me,
to?
if you want to read one, I'm going to stop presenting.
Yeah, sure.
And I think then I can see the chat.
All right. The first one is from Amir. If we have a degree that is not related to my field, should I put it in my resume or not? And does it have an effect?
If you have a degree not related to your field, should you put it in your resume or not? And does it have an effect? Most definitely. My degree has absolutely nothing to do with what I'm doing. You always include your education. You worked hard for your education. And if you have more than one degree, like let's say you went back to school to then get a degree that applies more so to what you're doing now, include them both. I feel like that falls under the don't truncate your resume sort of lesson. Like keep it. It's highly valuable. My degree is in nutrition, health, and wellness. I haven't done anything with nutrition, health, and wellness in 6 years. I'm in business and very much so like people operations. So it doesn't matter what you've done. A lot of times people have untraditional backgrounds, and I think yeah, definitely include it. That's great.
And for our second question, from Jonathan, Should we also take into account our potential employers may use an algorithm to look at certain keywords in our resume?
Yes, most definitely. So that is the applicant tracking system I was discussing. That is what is going to look for the keywords in your resume. Um, Hold on, I see your question right here. Potential employers may, yes. So you definitely want to take into account the algorithm. I know some people like to do this sort of like back end, like cheating way. I've heard like people put like white text in their resume, like in the sides. I just learned about this a couple weeks ago. That it's apparently a new way people are trying to cheat the system. They'll put a keyword that they don't really have the skills for and type it out and then make the text white and put it somewhere in the margins where you can't see it so that the applicant tracking system is picking up that word, but the recruiter's not actually seeing it. So there's like a lot of tricky ways and that people try to get around the algorithm, but a recruiter will know if you don't have the experience necessary. But just focus on really tailoring your resume to the job description. That's how you beat the applicant tracking systems, is making sure that your resume matches the words that they use, and really making sure that you're applying for jobs you're qualified for. I'm all for reaching your dreams, going for your goals and everything, but from a legal perspective, let me just let y'all know, because I didn't know this as a job seeker and I wish people had told me. If you apply for a job and you only have 3 years of experience and they're asking for 4, they're not going to take you. It's that moment of like, you're like, maybe maybe I'll try. And I used to be like that as well. It's a legal thing. Like if they're asking for 3 years and they really want 4 years, you know, and they interview someone, they say, you know what, she looks really good, but she only has 3 years. Let's interview her anyway. What about all those other people they rejected who had 3 years? All of those other people didn't get a fair shot, but you did at 3 years. And that's not fair. And then all those other people can come back and sue a company and get upset or do this and that. So it's very important that you meet the minimum qualifications for every role you apply for. And so if you meet the minimum qualifications and you tailor your resume to a job description, there's a pretty good chance your resume is going to make it. It's just about having a strong resume and really matching those keywords. And I can actually see the questions now, Handy, so I will answer them. Okay, so I see a question from Charlene. So when we put soft and hard skills, should we prove it by our experience, like saying we learned Spanish in school for 3 years? I guess if you have it within your academic experience, like in college, and you wanted to list it out, you could do that. But I would say that that's not really an efficient use of space. I would more so just list it with your skills. Just list like mine says intermediate Spanish. You can just say like beginner Spanish. I don't think you necessarily need to list how long. Again, that'll come later in the resume. You can talk about your skills and like what level of Spanish you possess. Like then you can say like, hey, I only did it for 3 years. I'm only at beginner level. That could be addressed later. So I would say just list it in your skills. If we understand a foreign language somewhat well but can't speak it well, do we include it regardless? I would include it and put beginner. I would input like beginner French, beginner Spanish. Include it, but speak to your level. That way you're not misrepresenting yourself. But if you do know some, include it. You know it, so might as well. All right, Alexa, when we are asked technical questions we don't know the right answer to or may lack a skill recruiters are looking for, how do we address these in an interview to keep them interested in us as a candidate? Ooh, interesting. Well, if you're lacking a skill recruiters are looking for, they may not want to move forward with you. Technical interviews are one of the hardest interviews, especially what we see at Google. They put people through these like crazy. I don't actually work in the tech side, so I don't really like know what goes on there. But they put people like through these like crazy like coding things and all that. So it's if you don't have the skills, the recruiter will find that out. It will be sussed out. So really only apply for jobs you're qualified for. Apply for jobs you feel good about, confident about, because you want to succeed in the interview. A lot of these companies keep notes. They keep notes on your interview. And if you do bad on an interview, they may not want to interview you ever again. So you want to make sure that you're applying for roles that you're qualified for so that you can have a strong interview every time. Because if you have a strong interview and maybe they decide not to move forward with you, they look at that later and they say, oh, hey, look, like she already interviewed once and she did really well. Like this is a good candidate. So So really only apply for jobs you feel confident about, qualified for, and that way you don't have, you won't like necessarily lack a skill the recruiters are looking for. So for community college students, we don't get to have that much experiences, especially related to target for certain jobs such internships we want to apply for. So your advice, tailoring our resumes to the job we apply for, how can we do that with a little amount of experiences? That is a great question. It is a lot harder to do that with limited experiences. I would say just tailor it the best you can. It kind of sounds like you're potentially trying to push again for something you're maybe not qualified for at that point. I would say maybe I would recommend upskilling a little bit more first. Take some Coursera things, take some LinkedIn premium classes. Um, you know, try to. You don't always have to internship at a big company either. My first job I worked for was for my friend's mom, and I worked for them for like 8 years. And I learned so much from her about like property management, project management. You don't have to work for these big flashy names to get great experiences. So look around in your life around you. Who can you help? If you're a web designer and you have a friend who needs help starting their business and their website, like help them. Then you have a project to put on your resume, like was able to get website off ground within 3 weeks for launch. It's all about, making your own. You don't catch a fish, right? You teach the person how to fish. So you really just want to be able to craft those experiences for yourself as well if you feel like you're lacking them. It's something I always like to say to people, like if you don't have opportunities, make your own opportunities. And really look around you to see if there's any problems that need to be solved that you could potentially contribute to. How can we leverage our experiences at community college and be competitive with students at four-year universities? I think that people at community colleges can be very competitive, especially if you upskill yourself. Like I said before, I'm just looking to see if you have a degree. If you have a degree, I don't care if it's from a community college. You could be from Harvard, you could be from Columbia, you could be from El Paso Community College. I took classes there, guys. I took a bunch of classes in my community college before I went to university. You can, have an education from anywhere. It's truly about your experiences, which are going to matter more. We're moving away from this like idea that you need like an Ivy League education and stuff. A lot of skills can be taught. A lot of people want to grow. And so that's not super necessary anymore. I would say what matters more is your experiences. So work on projects, work on crafting experiences for yourself, work on upskilling yourself, and keep learning, guys. Just keep, read a ton of books, read a ton of articles, try to network with people you respect who are in the fields you want to work with. You can gain a lot of knowledge from them by networking, by being in their network and seeing what they have to say. So it's really about making those opportunities for yourself and learning. Most of us will transfer to four-year university. How do we mention community college experience when building a resume? You can just parse it out. I for a while had my two different experiences, like I said, because I went to community college before I went to university as well, and I had my community college experiences, and then my other experiences on top. So you can just just have two separate education, and just put like studied 2 years before moving to university, and then you have your university up top. So no one's going to question that. So you can just include it there. I have a resume and I want some advice on how to improve it. Kind of maybe look through it and provide some suggestions. Yes, if you would like to connect with me, feel free to message me on LinkedIn. We can have a conversation a little later. Yes, Charlene. When you're applying to companies outside of your state, do you include the location when you are flexible in location? That's a good question as well. If you are, I would say, that's a good question. I would actually maybe remove it in that case. Like if you're open to remote opportunities and you're willing to move, sometimes recruiters, and these are not necessarily the greatest recruiters, but sometimes recruiters will look and see, like if you want a job in Seattle and I live in Austin, they'll see that I live in Austin and they'll be like, oh, like we don't want to pay for her relocation. So we're only going to look for candidates who are closer. So in that case, with a bad recruiter who's not very nice, they may reject me in that case when I'm perfectly willing to move to Seattle. So it's up to you whether or not you want to include that. I would say generally that's a couple one-off instances. Most recruiters are not like that. But you can always put in your title as well, like your city and your state, and then just put like open to relocation as well. Right up there next to city, state, and then it's just perfectly clear that you're willing to move. Da-da-da. Hold on. I've heard that in HR and investment banking look at your I actually don't know. This asking if in investment banking they look at your SAT and ACT scores. I've never heard of that being a thing, but I unfortunately do not work in the finance sphere, so I can't really speak to that. But I would think, I mean, your SAT and your ACT scores, those are really like a high school sort of thing. And by the time you're, out of college, that's, I'd say, doesn't apply as much. So I don't think they look at that, but I would do some more research, possibly try to get in touch with someone more in the finance sphere. Haven't worked at a job for a minimum of a year. Should I list jobs that I have worked at for 3 to 6 months? Yes. I know you guys are new grads. You're going to have the more hoppiness. It's natural in new grads. Like we said with internships as well, we know you guys don't have a ton of work experience, and we're a lot easier on new grads in that way. It's speaking to more like professionals when we get into that area. So list whatever you have, list whatever jobs you have. It's important that you be able to vouch for what you have done and speak to your experiences, so that you have something to discuss in the interview and have something to pull them in. So yeah, definitely list anything you have at that point. Do I have an example of a good resume and a bad resume? I actually have my resume. I was going to maybe show to you guys. I don't have an example of a bad resume right now, but I'd be happy to show you guys mine. Let me get through the last couple of questions and I can actually pull mine up for you guys. Is it possible to get an internship as a community college student? 100%. Totally get an internship as a community college student. Like I said before, sometimes it's making your own internship, right? Like find someone in your hometown or the place wherever you're living right now. Find someone who you think you could learn from, who you respect, who you like, and start to develop a relationship with them. Start to develop a relationship with them and see what value you can give them. It may be getting coffee for them, saying like, hey, like, can I be your personal assistant? Can I do this for you? I want to shadow you. I want to learn from you. A lot of times you can make your own internships after developing a relationship and then asking someone if they're willing to kind of take you under their wing. So this really falls more like in the networking sphere and really building out those relationships, because it's really going to help you, get those internships or to create your own just by connecting with amazing people. Do we need a section of our resume for awards we've received? I would say probably not, unless you are a person who does, like, I would say, like if you wrote for newspapers or magazines or something like that, and like you have like the Pulitzer Prize and a bunch of like writing awards you've won, you might want to have like a section for that. Or I've had like producers that I've hired and they have like all the awards they've won for things like that. So for more like creative types, maybe, but I would say generally if you've like won something within your role, just include it in the role experience. Like recently, earlier this year, my teammate voted me teammate of the quarter for quarter 2. And so I have it on my resume as like the last bullet point of my Google stuff. I'm like, amazing culture and was voted employee of the month for Q2. So, you can always include it with that individual aspect, because it kind of speaks more to that place that you were at specifically. But again, if you have like a ton of awards, then yeah, maybe I would make out your own section. All right, so let me share my screen again. So this is my resume, guys. And I have this is my fake address. Don't worry, I have a fake address for when I present to people, and a fake number, but that's my real email. You can contact me at. So as you can see, I have just like a little summary. Experience organizing amiable staffing and team management professional, currently seeking the company to grow with. Possesses significant skills in time management, adaptation, communication, taking on leadership roles, and winning individuals over. Is highly self-motivated with a passion for working with people and a demonstrated history of working in the tech and retail industry. So really just an elevator pitch, guys. Look at my name's not too much bigger than this over here. So it's not like huge, and notice how I have like underline and I'm sort of like breaking up my job experiences with these lines. So it just creates a little bit more separation. And then if you want to see, you can see here, all my stuff is in past tense. If you've done it in the past, it should be in past tense. If you're doing it now, it should be in present tense. That's also something very important to look at as well. All past stuff, now in present. So that's why it says maintains a 99% service level agreement. And as you can see, you can pull out numbers. See how it says like 99% here, 50 plus, 40 plus. You want to include those sorts of data and metrics where you can. And notice how you're not really seeing any. This is like the one, like how many words is this? This is 6 words. This is what I would say, like I'm taking up half the line here, and even this kind of looks a little wonky sometimes. Generally you want to take up most of the space. And I would even say that I need to go back because my resume is actually looking a little busy to me, and I could probably reduce this a little bit. But you see, manages 40 plus requisitions simultaneously and collaborates cross-functionally. So I'm plugging in the soft skills, collaborates. I'm using the soft skill in the experience. I'm using the metric 40 plus requisitions. And it's really just about making things sound higher level as well. Changing, a simple word to a more complicated word. You want to dress up your resume. This is the time to, use that really good vocabulary, those $10 million words per se. And, I have, these italicized via deco at high profile promotions. Notice how like the formatting is consistent. All of these line up perfectly on the end of the page. And then I just have my skills down here at the bottom, my educational experience, my different, resume, my different college education experiences. I don't have my community college on here anymore, as I have my universities. But, to that other person who asked that question, you would just like put the community college experience down here as well. And I feel like this is important to point out, additional experience. This is where you could have your pre-professional, or for me, because I did a bunch of jobs at the same time, when I tried to put my events specialist role in with all these, it made the dates start to line up funny. And you want your dates to make sense. And so I took it out and I put it separately so that it didn't throw off the resume. And because events usually isn't as typically related to the business work I'm doing. So I still want to include it because it's important, but it may not be as highly related to the jobs I'm applying for in business and recruiting. So yeah, this is my resume, guys. Just you need very simple, clean, stay consistent with the formatting and try to get lots of hard-hitting data. Let me see, a couple more questions. You can contact me. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can visit my website. I will type it right here if you'd like to connect with me. That is my website. I will upload the presentation. I actually have the presentation on there, but I edited it for you guys and made it a little bit better. So I will upload the better version to my website this weekend. But the resume slideshow deck is there for you to refer to. You can connect with me as a future resource. And wait, there's one more question. Do you have any suggestions on resume template and resume auditing tools? So for resume templates, Canva is a great resource for those pretty resume templates. In regards to a resume template, I just really recommend using a Word doc. Just use a Word doc, keep it simple. There's no need to get crazy. Like you saw on mine, I just literally like break it down with bullet points. It doesn't need to be anything crazy. So I actually don't recommend using a template most of the time because they end up taking up more space and like messing with the formatting. And you have a lot more control over what you do in a Word document. And yeah, and other than that, LinkedIn, network, get on Canva if you'd like to change your LinkedIn banner, but June's going to talk about all of that. She's amazing. You guys are going to love her. And that's about all the time I have today, guys. So I appreciate you guys so much. And thank you for having me, Andy.